My mother, she passed away. Now my father is demanding that I move out of my childhood room, and guess who's going to be staying there? His mistress. And there's something to this mistress. Why does she look so familiar? Guys, she was my mathematics teacher back in high school. I never thought I'd find myself writing here, but life really does have a way of humbling you. First things first, this is a throwaway account because I don't want anything being linked back to me. I just need genuine advice because I've been wondering if I truly did the right thing. This is a lengthy read, but it's definitely worth it. Alright guys, let me give you a bit of context. I'm 22, I'm male, I've always had a complicated relationship with my father. We've never been close and it always used to bother me. I would even get jealous of my friends' relationships with their fathers, but I eventually got over it and accepted that my father and I would never be too close. However, I do believe that the reasons why we aren't so close is because of how different we are. We're polar opposites, and I did have a very close relationship with my mother, though. She was my rock and pillar of strength. I honestly still can't believe that she's gone. I mean, this year my mother passed away. She was very sick with cancer, but the sicker she got, the harder it got for her to remain optimistic. She truly tried her best to fight that disease, but she got extremely tired and eventually she gave up. On days when I missed her terribly, I would tell myself that at least she's resting and is no longer in pain. My mother was one of a kind of a woman, and I hope that one day I'll find a woman just like her. My father never truly appreciated my mom. I've always felt that he took advantage of her kindness. I mean, he did abandon her the moments we found out that she was sick. He just completely changed up and switched to being oh so distant. He never showed up or accompanied her to any of her doctor appointments. He would always come up with a lousy excuse. I was the one who had to organize and plan her funeral because my father felt like he couldn't do it, which I found bogus and honestly disappointing. He tried to take credit for the planning of the funeral because of how beautiful and sentimental it was. But everyone, especially my mother's side of the family, knew that I was the one who had planned everything with no help. Anyways, let me not bore you guys too much with the deets. Recently, I was on my way home from college when I received a call from my mother's attorney. He was calling to inform me that my mother's estate had finally been sorted and that everything was now finalized. So he was just wondering when could my father and I come to the office and read the will. Well, I told him that I, could talk to my dad and then let him know. My mom had been very successful in her career, and she was also from a very wealthy family, so it's no surprise when the attorney told us it would take rather a lot of time for the estate to be sorted amongst us, and she did have a lot of family inheritances. My father, on the other hand, got so annoyed when he found out about this, he actually harassed my mother's attorney for a month. Yeah, which caused her attorney to get a restraining order. But that's a story for another day. So, when I got home, I found a dirty but empty house. I switched on the lights and found bottles of beer all over the coffee table in the living room. I shook my head and just started cleaning up. My father's always been a bit of a drinker. Heavy drinker. But it got a lot worse when Mom passed. He could not finish, the smallest of drink without chugging it, and he could even finish a whole bottle of vodka by himself in one sitting, which was very concerning, but when I brought up my connection and concern with him, he just lost it and threatened to kick me out. After I was done cleaning up, I took a shower and did a bit of studying. My father showed up drunk as a skunk with a familiar young lady. Wow, the lady looked so familiar, but I just could not put a finger on it. I greeted them and they greeted me back. My father asked if I'd cooked and I told him that I had not because I was simply busy doing my schoolwork. He rolled his eyes and made this typical discouraging comments about me being in college. My father was so against my furthering of studies that he felt that I should have gotten a job straight after high school. He even told me that if I decided to go to college, he would not pay for a dime of it, which honestly broke my heart. But, luckily, my mother agreed to pay for my college tuition. She had always wanted me to go to college so that I could have a qualification.
My mother was a very big person on education, and everyone knew about it. She even has her own little foundation she started a few years ago that helps college students pay off their student debt. My father has always hated that foundation to the core. He felt that my mother and her family were just wasting money. After my dad made his comments, I then noticed that there were 2 pink suitcases by the door. So I asked my father to whom the suitcases belonged. He pointed at a lady and proceeded to ask if she could sleep in my room. I looked at him confused and raised my eyebrow. I asked him why did she need to sleep in my room and who was she? Well, she giggled and told me that she was surprised that I did not remember her. So my father then told me that her name was Linda and that she's been his personal assistant for the past 5 years. He then added that she also used to tutor me while I was in high school. It then clicked that she used to tutor me for mathematics back in the day. I then asked my father why she was here and why he wanted her to sleep in my room. He looked nervous and responded by saying that she needed a place to stay because she was going through financial difficulties. She then added that things have been tough for her financially, and I don't know, I just sighed and told my father that she could sleep in my room. Well, they both cracked a smile, and he just assured me that all this was going to be temporary, and that she should be back on her feet soon enough. After helping Linda settle in, I asked my father if I could speak to him in private. Well, at that point, guys, he went ahead to raise his eyebrows, but told me that he could talk in, his room in a minute. Guys, his room was a disaster, and it did not look like the bedroom my mother had spent years designing and decorating. My father asked what I wanted to talk about, and Mom's estate being finalized, and her attorney informing me that we need to book an appointment for the will reading. Well, his eyes immediately lit up, and he told me to call the attorney now, book the appointment for the next day. Well, I shook my head and told him that it's a little late and that I could only call him next morning. He frowned and then smiled and then told me that I should call the attorney first thing in the morning and book an appointment ASAP. Well, I told him I would. Well, as I was about to leave, he told me that it was about damn time that they finalized my mom's estate. Since Linda was using my room, I was going to be sleeping in the living room, which at least had a comfortable sofa bed. While I was trying to sleep, I could not help but wonder why my father was helping Linda. Was it because she had helped him? Was it because she helped me? I mean, she's the reason why I was able to qualify to study engineering, and she turned my D- average into an A- average, which got me into one of the best engineering colleges in the country. Yet something did not feel right about this whole situation, and I wish that I would have listened to my gut instincts. It's really late, and I must sleep since I have to call the attorney tomorrow. I'll return with another update if it's even worth updating to you guys. Thank you for following through and reading all this. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. So, today's story is a little bit of a wild ride. Oh, I could not imagine being in OP's position, having somebody come into your house and a strange person just waltzing into your room and then you realize it was your old teacher. I can't wait to see where this leads. Guys, if you're new to the channel and you're not subscribed, take a second, hit that subscribe button. It does help out support the channel a lot. About 20% of viewers right now are subscribed to the channel, so let's try to make it 21. Guys, here is update number 1. Hey, I'm back with another update. Linda's been staying with us for over 2 weeks and she's gotten really comfortable, to the point that she was comfortable walking through the house just in her underwear, which made me feel really weird. However, when I brought this up to my father, he told me to close my eyes, let her be. Let her be? WTF? He then proceeded to remind me that she was a guest in our home and that it's a good thing that she was getting all comfy, which I just found strange, but anyways, like really, really strange. We had finally gotten an appointment with my mother's attorney, and we were now waiting for him in his office sipping on some coffee. The reason why it's taken us so long to get an appointment was because of the restraining order. The attorney had on my father, and they had to get it temporarily revoked so that this appointment could take place. So the attorney finally arrives and he greets us and we greet him back. He then tells us that he would not be taking too much of our time, and My father made a snarky comment about always being busy since he's such a businessman. The attorney completely ignored him and just proceeded to read the will. The will stated that everything would be going to me because my mom had left me as the head of her estate, and my father asked the attorney to let him take a look at the will, and he gave it to him. Well, my father scanned up and down through it, and I could tell that he was fuming with anger, and he was compressing his anger inside. Then the attorney proceeded to explain that my mother had left a lot of money that would be shared between my father and me in a joint account. Well, at that point, my father smiled, and I didn't listen to the rest of the reading because I was shocked that Mom had left everything to me. I wish I could have asked her why. A few days have passed since the reading, and my father's been acting rather strange. He's been acting very friendly towards me, which was unusual behavior, because he's always just been a hardcore man. I just finished up at the student finance office, and I had informed them that the money for my fees would now be taken out of the joint account that my father and I were sharing. I was grateful that I did not have to worry about my fees anymore. My uncle's been helping me out with my fees since my mother passed away, but he could only do so much because it wasn't his responsibility. Just as I was about to head home, I received a text from my father asking me to meet him at the bowling alley. I was surprised, but texted him that I would be there in 30 minutes flat. Well, guys, when I got there, I found him waiting outside for me, and he was dressed casually. He greeted me with a hug and asked how I was doing, so I was taken a bit back, and I stuttered my response, which he laughed at. He told me that he was wanting us to have some guy time, so he had thought of bowling. He then reminded me of how I used to beg him to take us out bowling. Well, this was true because as a child, I used to always beg my father to spend time with me, and he would always use the bare minimum of an excuse saying I'm busy. Well, we did bowl for about a good hour and a half, and then he suggested that we go grab a dinner bite. It's a new restaurant in town we were going to try. So we got to the restaurant and ordered our food and drinks, and I suggested that before we leave, we should get something for Linda. He rolls his eyes and says that Linda is a grown woman and that she would figure out something for herself to eat. Well, he starts asking me questions about myself, school, how I was doing. He even asked if I was seeing anybody, and I told him that I was not because my main focus was graduation. He sighed and then proceeded to admit that he had always been jealous of my drive and how disciplined I was. I asked why was he jealous, and the man has his own construction company, and he tells me that if he had been a hard worker like me, he probably would have been a multimillionaire by now. Yeah, I laughed at that one, and he also laughed. He then got super serious and admitted that he had made a lot of mistakes with me. He also acknowledged that he's never made time for me while I was a kid, and that he apologized for that. He confided in me and explained that life has never been easy for him because he grew up in a household that was full of violence. Well, I was shocked to hear that because my father hardly spoke about his family, except for his brother, my uncle, who I was very close to. Well, I just found it a bit odd that my uncle had never mentioned that he's been raised by a violent environment either. My father continued confiding in me about his childhood, which just sounded tough and sad. After he was done, he told me that he wanted to work on our relationship and that he wanted us to have that fun, strong father-son relationship we never had, something that I've always wanted. I told him that I would love for us to work on our relationship. I would. He smiled and thanked me for giving him the opportunity to fix things between us. We then spoke about my mom, and he was singing her praises, which I enjoyed hearing because he hardly ever spoke about her. He then told me that my mother got pregnant with a baby girl while I was still a toddler, but unfortunately a miscarriage happened. I was surprised to hear about this because my mother has never mentioned about her losing a pregnancy, but maybe if I had just been, talking about it, it might have been too painful for her to talk about it. He said that he's never fully recovered from that, and that it still haunts him to this day because really he wanted a girl and for me to have a sibling. He would go on to explain that his therapist had told me that because of that, my father ended up becoming cold and distant towards me because he never expressed his feelings, and also that he never properly grieved, which made perfect sense to me. I told him that I now understand everything and thanked him for confiding in me. He told me that this was the start of a beautiful father-son bond. How I wish my mother could have witnessed such a moment in person, but I knew that she was watching over my father and me, and she was probably happy about the fact that we were now working on our relationship. Something that she had always wanted, and I believe things are going well, and I may not be back for another update, so I do want to say thank you for reading. Update number 2. Hey, I never thought I'd be back on here, but, well, here I am. It's becoming like a personal space for me to write. I hope you don't mind it. Well, a few months have passed and Linda's still staying with us, but I hardly even saw her anyways. Things with my father have been amazing. We hung out almost every weekend, and he is always finding something fun and adventurous for us to do. Well, now things just seem to be changing. I'm fuming to rage right now. Let me walk you through this. We had just finished writing exams a few weeks ago, and I was patiently waiting for my final results. I was in the library when a classmate of mine asked if I had checked my results. So I just told her that simply our results had not been released yet. She raised her eyebrow and told me that our results have been released a week ago. Well, I was confused because I've not received an email about my results being released. I excused myself and rushed over to one of the computers and checked my student portal. I was shocked by what appeared on the screen, and it stated that my results are being withheld because of outstanding fees. I was confused and immediately headed to the Student Finance Center. The finance lady explained that my student account has been in the negative for a few months and that they've been notifying my father, but it seemed like he has been ignoring their calls and emails. I explained to her that my father and I had organized and implemented a debit order plan with the bank, so that on a monthly basis the bank would pay a certain amount into my student finance account. This was done so that fees would be paid off in full by the end of the semester. I thought it was so smart to do monthly installments, instead of having to pay a large lump sum amount at the end of the semester. Something was definitely wrong, and I thanked the lady and quickly rushed off to my bank. So I tried calling my father, but it just kept going to voicemail. I got to my bank and asked to see a consultant. I went ahead and explained everything to the consultant, and he then checked the account. What he said next almost gave me an absolute heart attack. He told me that there was no money in the account, and I told him that's simply impossible. So he turned the computer screen to face me, and he was absolutely right. There was no money left in the account. As I was about to text my father to tell him that we've been robbed, and that there's no money, the consultant told me that all the money's been withdrawn and transferred into another account under the name of Adam Jones. My blood went cold, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I asked the consultant to repeat what he just said. He told me that Adam Jones had withdrawn and transferred the money. The consultant raised his eyebrows in confusion and asked how did I not know this because according to the records I signed off on this. He showed me a digital document which had a fraudulent version of my signature. So I told the consultant, hold on, I need to take a breather. He told me that he had emailed the document and I apparently signed it digitally. He said that he hoped that whatever was going on would be solved. I thanked him and walked out holding back tears because I knew that this was all my father's doing. I could not believe that he had done something like this. After all the promises that he's made to me, this was what he was doing. My heart was shattered and I was numb. How dare he steal my money? How dare he jeopardize my future? What kind of father does such nonsense? So, after I calmed myself down, I went to my cousin Amanda's place. I explained everything to her and she was not shocked. She told me that my father was not capable of change. She told me that her father had always warned her not to get close to my father because of how manipulative and toxic he was. As I was about to tell Amanda more about what my father had said, I did receive a call. I got a nice phone call, from my godmother, who had been my mom's best friend, and she asked me where I was, and I told her where I was. She asked me to send her the GPS location for me and not to leave. I could tell that she was very angry, so I sent her the location. When she arrived, she was fuming with absolute anger and just asked me why the hell was Linda strutting around in our house. Well, I explained to her that Linda's been staying with us for the past few months due to financial difficulties. My godmother starts to laugh and asked if that was the nonsense my father had spewed out of his mouth. Well, I nodded my head and asked her what's going on. She looked at me and took a deep breath. I was absolutely shattered by what she told me next. She exposed that my father's been having an affair with Linda ever since my mom got sick. I felt sick to my stomach. She further explained that my mother had always known about the affair but kept it to herself for my sake. She knew that this type of information would absolutely destroy me, and it would have definitely destroyed any sort of relationship I had with my dad. So she acted like everybody was just okay with it. I was getting more and more disgusted by my father. At this point, I was even ashamed to call him Dad. It was just one blow after another, and I then asked my godmother about the pregnancy and my mother had lost. My godmother looked at me confused and asked what the heck I'm talking about. Well, I told her that my father had finally told me about it. Her face looked disgusted, and she told me that there was never a stillbirth or a lost pregnancy or a miscarriage of any sort. And that would have been impossible because my father has fertility issues, hence why I was the only child. That was, well, for me, was the last straw. My father had clearly been manipulating me for his own benefit. He never actually wanted to fix things with me. Everything he had told me at that stupid restaurant was nothing more than a bloody lie. This old man was going to pay for everything, and he was not going to get away with this. Update number 3. Hey guys, it's been 2 weeks since I found out all about my father's dirty little lies. I have not been home since, and I have been staying at Amanda's place, trying to figure out my next moves and how I was going to make that old man pay. Luckily, I had gone to my mother's attorney, and he had explained everything in detail to me, about the will and what I could do about my father's fraudulent actions. Well, I had called my Uncle Dave to accompany me to the house. I'd explained everything to him, and he was just disgusted by everything. However, he was not really surprised. I also found out through him that my father had lied about growing up in a violent household. He told me that that was the furthest from the truth, and he informed me that they had actually grown up on a very loving household, hence why my father's behavior confused him because he was acting like he had grown up in such a toxic environment. So, we arrived at the house and my father's car was parked outside, meaning that he was home. We didn't bother knocking and just entered. We found my father with a woman that we did not know. He was shocked to see us and asked what we were doing there, and I then reminded him that I actually lived there. He then responded by saying that I had not been home for the past 2 weeks, and that he has been worried sick about me. Well, I laughed and told him to stop lying because I now knew everything. He gave me an icy glare and asked me what the hell I was talking about. I then proceeded to ask him about Linda, and I told him that he was a disgusting human being for not doing that, well, behind my mom's back, and she knew it and everything. He went on to roll his eyes and snapped that their marriage has been over a long time ago. I could not believe that he just said that. He then told me that it was never his responsibility to take care of my mom, and that he never signed up to even, well, have a sick wife. My uncle just stared at him in absolute disbelief. I also could not believe what I was hearing. The lady looked at us and told us that she should leave because this seemed like it was a family matter that she did not need to be a part of. Well, I asked her who she was. She told me that she was my father's girlfriend, which confused me even more. I asked my father, where is Linda? He told me that he kicked her out because she was becoming a nuisance. He admitted that the only reason that he let her stay was because she was blackmailing him. Well, I shook my head and told him that I was oh so disappointed in him. My uncle asked the lady how could she possibly be with such an evil, vile man. Well, she chuckled and said that she did not care because they were going on holidays to Paris next week. I told her that was not going to happen, and my father stood up and walked closer to me. He told me that the trip was going to happen, and he reminded me that he was a free agent and did not owe anybody any form of loyalty. Well, I told him that I knew that he had stolen the money from the joint account. He froze and started hysterically laughing, and then he yelled that all the money belonged to him because of all the boredom that he had to put up with. He went on just to confess that he never wanted me, and that it was my stupid mother who had wanted children. So I told him that I knew that he had fertility issues anyways.
He froze, and then regained his train of thought, and he told me that the money was all his, and that there was simply nothing I could do about it.
Well, I smirked and then proceeded to tell him that I had laid a criminal charge against him, and that there was a warrant out for his arrest as we speak.
Well, I could tell he started to get a bit nervous.
The lady asked him if I was being serious, and then I told him that the bank, the police, the attorneys were all aware that he has forged my signature, which is a serious offense. The lady gasped in shock and told my father that she wanted no part of this and rushed out.
My father looked straight into my eyes
and told me to get the hell out of here, now. And I told him, well, this wasn't his house. At that point, he gave me a warning and told me that I was playing a very dangerous game. I told him that the house was only in my name and that my mother had removed him from the deed because she was the one who bought the home. I told him that he has exactly 10 minutes to pack all his crap and leave. Otherwise, I would call the police and tell them that he was trespassing. Well, I felt a bit backwards, and then I fell onto the floor, because my father had just punched me square in the face. My uncle immediately reacted and gave my father the beatdown of a lifetime. After my uncle was done, I called the cops. They arrived within 5 minutes and escorted my father out of the house with handcuffs. After they had left, my uncle and I searched the house to make sure that Linda had really left. It turns out that she really did leave. He then put an ice pack on my eye because it was badly bruised, and my father had done a bit of damage, but not as much damage as old uncle did to him. We opened up a bottle of gin and juice and started laughing about how the hectic things had gotten. I told him that I did not know that he could fight like that, and he told me that he used to wrestle back in high school. I definitely did not expect things to turn out this way, and I was just grateful that my uncle has been here. Who knows that my stunts my father would have pulled would have been this crazy? I mean, I never in a million bajillion years would have thought that he would have gotten physical with me, but I guess I truly have no clue who he is. Because of all the lies that he told me, I was just hoping that for once the law would be on my side. Final update. Update number 4. Hey guys, well, it's been a couple of months and I'm back. A couple of months since all this happened. Firstly, my father was no longer in police custody but was going on trial in a few weeks. I decided not to drop the charges despite the fact that he was ordered to return whatever money he had and repay what he used. It was pretty obvious that my father had only been spending time with me because he wanted to backstab me by stealing the money. He probably thought that I was not going to do anything because of how soft I was. But he was wrong. I was going to make sure that he got jail time. He did try to apologize and beg for forgiveness once he realized that I was not going to drop the charges. But I have not spoken to him since that day. I wanted nothing to do with the man. I mean, he was dead to me. Linda came by the house just the other week to apologize for her part in this whole mess. She told me that my father had used his power and positions to manipulate her. She also told me that my father had fired her, and once he did that, she felt that she had no choice but to blackmail him until she found another job. I told her that I've forgiven her long ago and understand why she did what she did. I also told her to stay away from a married man from now on. I then found out that my father's been splurging all the money on young girls, alcohol, and expensive luxuries, which I was not going to drop the charges, you know. The good news is that I paid off my outstanding fees and I will be graduating soon. It just sucks that none of my parents will be there, but at least my uncle, godmother, and Amanda would be there. I also know that my mother will be watching me from above. I truly don't regret retaliating against my dad. I was about, ready, and it was time that he got what he deserved. He put my mother and me through hell, and it's all for nothing. All because he was just toxic and greedy. And this act of revenge wasn't just for me, but it was also for my mom, who decided to stay with such a disgusting man. So just so I could have some sort of relationship with him, I was not about to let him get away with anything. Hopefully all of this will teach him a valuable lesson, even at his old age.